Early Egypt explained. Ancient Egypt civilization lasted from 3000 BCE to 332 BCE. Now that is what historians call a ridiculous long time. From the beginning, the Nile shaped the worldview of the Egyptians. The Nile was the richest and safest agricultural areas in the world because each summer the Nile would flood the fields at the perfect time, and this led to silt in the soil for planting season. The cycle consisted of flood, plant, harvest, and then flood, plant, harvest. Planting was so easy for ancient Egyptians that they would just throw seeds at the soil and have their cattle or pigs walk on it to prep it. In contrast to other civilizations, early Egypt civilizations only developed along the Nile. The Nile was worshipped as a god, giver of life, and as benevolent. Since the Nile was so tame and dependable, the Egyptians only had to create a simple flood irrigation system for the soil and use boats to carry crops downstream. Since maintaining agriculture was relatively simple, this allowed energy for some extremely impressive projects, such as one of the original 7 wonders of the world, Great Pyramid of Giza. Since ancient Egypt civilization was a crazy long time, historians have developed 3 broad categories, each with their own numbered dynasties. We are not trying to become hardcore Egyptologists, so we're not going to cover each Egyptian dynasty. So now with the dates. Old Kingdom was approximately 2649 through 2152. The Middle Kingdom was approximately 2040 through 1640. And the New Kingdom, called the New Kingdom because it's only 3,000 years old, is approximately 1550 through 1070 BCE. So the Old Kingdom. This was the glory age that would later inspire a lot of films such as The Prince of Egypt, The Mummy, The 10 Commandments, The Mummy Returns, The Scorpion King, and of course our beloved Indiana Jones. Okay, so here's the Old Kingdom in a nutshell. The pharaoh, or king rather, was perceived as a god. Doesn't sound so bad, but they were expected to act as a god, and not as a person, which in ancient Egypt means acting like the Nile, calm and keeping their cool all the time. Very impossible job description. They also organized strong central state and were absolute rulers. Now the pyramids, which aside from being, for lack of a better word, freakishly awesome, they represent a remarkable degree of political and social control over the population. This diagram shows how Egyptian society was shaped, which groups form the top 2 levels of the social pyramid, which were the pharaoh and government officials, which were all the way down to the slaves. The most famous pyramids were built between 2575 through 2465 BCE, such as the Sphinx, which was built for the pharaoh Khafre, and the Great Pyramid, which was built for the pharaoh Khufu. So the pyramids took an abundant amount of resources and energy from the people. And the bent pyramid was the first attempt of the classic shape, but later was perfected. So here's the ultimate question. Why in the sweet name of Ra would anyone build such things? Who is Ra, do you ask? Ra became the central pantheon of ancient Egypt. So long story short, the god of Ra was the god of the sun, but also the god of creation. And the deal was, if Egyptians do their job, then the gods would maintain cosmic order. Since the pharaohs became gods upon their death, it made sense to please them with a sweet afterlife. Happy Pharaoh afterlife equaled cosmic order of sun cycle, which at night would be the death of Ra, and the morning would be the rebirth of Ra. The pyramids were the tomb for the pharaohs. The pharaohs were believed to be the descendants of the sun god Ra, making them half gods and kings. Because of this, the Egyptians believed that the gods owned Egypt and the pharaoh was the manager. Therefore, the pharaoh was absolute power. Another reason why the Old Kingdom was super impressive is they were very literate. They had two forms of writing, the more famous one being hieroglyphics, which were sacred writing. In Greek, it means holy writing. And second, the Demotic script, which was for boring stuff like contracts, documents, definitely not as cool as God's words. So who wrote the hieroglyphics? Pharaohs, the kings of ancient Egypt, loved to write about their adventures and achievements so that everyone knew how great they were. They also believed that carving their names in stone would help them live forever, since their names would never be forgotten. The biggest insult you could give someone was destroying their name on the tombs or statues. Lastly, the Egyptians were extremely wealthy, but what led to the collapse of the Old Kingdom came poverty because of droughts, which also led to the power struggles between pharaohs and because resources became scarce. The decline of the Old Kingdom. The government during the Old Kingdom grew corrupt. Leaders fought among themselves for power and wealth, and when a civil war erupted, the Old Kingdom ended. So this is my crash course on the Old Kingdom and ancient civilizations for Egypt.